Hi, I think we're live. Yeah, it looks like we're live. Hi, yeah, I'm Sue. So welcome to these sessions that I'll be doing every week for the ACT Matrix with Addiction. Today we're going to be doing one loop of the ACT Matrix, which we'll do every week because it's about repetition. It's in the training of doing it again and again. That's really helpful. And then I'll look at the mindfulness aspect of the matrix. So I hope it's helpful. These sessions are predominantly aimed at people who work in recovery and addiction services, but they're also, they're helpful for anybody really who's got an interest in addiction personally, professionally. Um, and also, I'm so used to doing groups in kind of like in the physical world with other people. So it would be really useful for those that are here with me live. There's a chat box that you can kind of engage in the process if you want to. If you're willing, that would be really helpful for me. If not, then just kind of like absorbing the learning is just as helpful. As we go along, if you've got any questions, please ask. I can't guarantee that I'll know them all, or know all the answers, but I'll do my best. Yeah, so if you're willing, I'd like to show you this point of view called the ACT Matrix. There are many, many modalities of working with people in addiction, and this is just one. It's the one that I've worked with for about 12 years, and I have found it to be really helpful for me personally and professionally. So, if you're willing, I need to share my screen. Okay, so can you see that for those that are here live with me? If you could just put in the chat, that'd be really useful. I'll assume that you can, and I'll just keep going. Okay, so this is the ACT matrix. You can use this. Great, thank you, James. Yeah, I hope it's not too small. Hi, Claire. Great. So I hope it's not too small on your screen. I've tried to make it as big as possible. So the matrix is a very simple grid or diagram that you can use with yourself or anyone. All you need is a piece of paper and a pen. So the first line is the horizontal line, and you just draw a line across and you write on the right hand side towards and on the left hand side away. And then the vertical line, you write senses at the top and mind at the bottom. You don't have to put the noticing symbol in straight away. And we start in the lower right. So we ask people, who is important to you in your life? And I'll start. So, and also as a facilitator, if you're doing one-to-one work or group work, we get involved. So we set the tone. So you always start. So for me, it's my sons. And if anybody else would like to get involved and write in the chat who's important to you, that would be really helpful. So who else is important to me? My partner. Family, friends, pets, that comes up for a lot of people, and colleagues perhaps. Hi Monique. Colleagues. Oh, spelled that wrong. And still spelled it wrong. That doesn't look right. Okay, so is there anything else that anyone would like to add on the lower right? Yes, absolutely. So, thank you, James. So your daughter is important to you. Right, let me just make this smaller so we can fit it in. Great. Okay. So, when you're working with people, you can explore this what's important stuff in a lot more depth. And you can even open it up to a wider kind of context around other aspects of life that could be important. But what I've always noticed over the years is that if you start with who's important, 9 times out of 10 people will be able to connect with somebody in their life that's important. They may be in their life, they may not be in their life at the moment, but they still get that felt sense that that person is important to them. And then on the left lower part of the matrix, we will invite people to share like the yucky stuff that shows up for them, internal yucky stuff. This is what they call it in America, is the yucky stuff. Over here in the UK we call it not once. So those are the thoughts, feelings and physical sensations that show up in our daily lives. So it can be in relation to who's important to you, but it can be kind of generally what kind of thoughts, feelings and physical sensations show up for you that you would rather not have. So for me, fear is a big one. Fear of doing these sessions. Anxiety, I noticed that in myself. Stress. And again, if you want to get involved in the chat, you're more than welcome. What other kind of yucky stuff shows up internally? They can be the thoughts that we have, feelings like shame and guilt, regret, feeling embarrassed. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we might experience. Regret. Oh, I put that. Regret. I'm not good enough. I put those in quotation marks because they're thoughts. Yeah, nerves. I get that when I'm doing these. Feeling nervous. And then what comes with that kind of stuff for me is shaking, like the physical sensations, heart pounding, heart rate increasing, sweating. Let me just put another text box in here. Sorry, it's a bit small, but fit them all in. Sweating, a dry mouth, my throat kind of tightens. So all of these stuff that we notice shows up for us. Thoughts, feelings, physical sensations. And in groups, the really interesting thing and the aspect of this that I really love is when you've got a room full of about 8 to 10 people, the list goes on and on and on and on. People just keep sharing, keep sharing, keep sharing. And the useful thing about that is it normalizes experience. It normalizes this internal yucky stuff that we all have as human beings. And when people walk into services for the first time, some people just don't realize that actually other people experience the same stuff as they do. And as facilitators as well, I've had many occasions where people have said to me, wow, you get anxious. I'm like, yes, I definitely get anxious. And that in and of itself can be really helpful to people. Okay, so this is the yucky stuff in the bottom left. Now in the top left. This is the behaviours that we do to find relief from the yucky stuff. So the obvious ones in the field of addiction, well, actually you can get addicted to anything, but for the context of what I've been doing and working with over the last kind of like 15 years, is drinking. Get relief from anxiety, stress, fear. If you have social anxiety, have a drink. Using drugs. What other behaviours do people do to find relief from the yucky stuff? So when you feel stressed or when you feel food, yes, eating, yes. Eating, drinking, overspending, yes. Absolutely. Shopping. Chocolate, one of my personal favourites. Sleeping. Cleaning, yeah. Yep. Cleaning. Exercising. You know, people kind of get stressed, go for a run. Running. Right, let's create another text box. Make it a bit smaller. Being too accommodating, yes. So saying stuff like exercising, so being too accommodating. For me, when I'm being too, yes, it's stuff like people pleasing, saying yes when really I want to say no, or saying no when really I want to say yes. Saying no, saying yes. Like arguing, causing an argument. Like manipulating as well, and lying, manipulating. You know, this is what all people are doing, all these kinds of different things. And this list as well goes on and on and on. So down here, what we do is we draw some arrows. So when anxiety shows up, I can go into avoidance mode. When stress shows up, I do a lot of planning, a lot of rehearsing. I go over stuff again and again. Fear of being judged, you know, going into people pleasing mode. Fear of being rejected. I will say yes to stuff when really it's not in my best interest. So does that make sense? And in and of themselves, a lot, you know, most of or all of these behaviours in and of themselves are not bad or good. We're all, as a species, biologically, we are all finding ways to get relief from the uncomfortable stuff. And some kind of more generic ones would be like, if you're cold, how do you find relief from being cold? You put a jumper on. Or if you're thirsty, what do? You go get a drink. Or if you're hungry, you eat. So we're all in this kind of cycle of finding relief from our yucky stuff, which isn't a problem until it becomes a problem. And it becomes a problem when it becomes unworkable. And with addiction, unworkability is when we start to what's called specialize in one or two behaviours to find relief from all of the yucky stuff. And then it spirals, and life starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller because our life starts to revolve around that behaviour. And yucky stuff from what I have spoke to people in all the years I've been doing this work, is absolutely a human experience. All humans experience internal stuff that they do not want to have. So we're kind of chasing our tails if we're constantly trying to find relief from them. So what happens is people in addiction get stuck on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side of the matrix, and helping people to start noticing how they're in these loops in and of itself can be massively transformational, because a lot of people just spend time on autopilot doing the same thing over and over again, not realizing that the short-term fix, which is to use or drink, is creating long-term consequences. They start to realize the long-term consequences when they're sat in them and things have got really shit. So working with people in that way to start noticing how they respond to their internal world is really, really helpful. So then we go on to the top right. And the top right is asking people, okay, so what have you done in, say, the last week or two, which is moving you closer? And this is behaviours, because above the line is behaviours. What behaviours have you done in the last week or so which has moved you closer to the people you care about? So any examples? So for me, it would be watching my son play football is like a big one for me, and a lot of the time. Doing these webinars actually is moving me closer to the people that I care about. Yes, listening, taking sun, swimming, practicing presence, being present. Yeah, lovely examples, thank you. And these things take effort. Calling your mum, calling my mum. Yeah. Okay, and so joining in with things, not sitting out. Let's get back to this. Thank you, Claire. Yeah, joining in. Joining in. Oops. Joining in and not sitting out. Yeah, absolutely. So all of this stuff, it can take a lot of effort. And the problem, whether it's a problem, the thing with towards behaviours, the things that move us closer, we get a sense of satisfaction, but they don't feel the same as away behaviours. They're far less addictive. The instant relief that away behaviours provides is addictive. No matter what it is, it doesn't have to just be drinking or using, it can be anything. The reward from doing towards behaviours, to get into a loop on the towards side, is much more difficult and takes a lot more effort. But the thing is, what we're asking clients to do is to start to notice how it feels when you're doing towards stuff and how it feels when you're doing away stuff. And what you'll notice when people come into services, their lives are way out of balance. So all of us, nobody does any more than 50-50. Nobody gets any better than 50-50 on each side. So if you're doing 50% towards and 50% away, you are smashing this stuff. Most of us are doing, like, I don't know, me personally, I'm probably doing 70% away behaviours during the day, 30% towards behaviours. So it's not about always being on the towards side, because we're not hardwired that way. But with people who walk into service, this likelihood is that they're not doing many towards behaviours at all. And so it's about starting to develop the resilience to move into more towards behaviours. And more towards behaviours are engaging in new stuff. And the difficult part of that is that if you've spent the last 20 years or so avoiding the yucky stuff down here in the bottom left, your tolerance to it is going to be low. And so what we're inviting people to do is small steps of taking that stuff with you and doing meaningful activities. Does that make sense? That's a very brief overview of towards behaviours and away behaviours. Great. Okay. So when somebody comes into a service, the best place to start with somebody is with their values. Like I said, some people come into services and you can say to them who's important to you or what's important to you, and they just won't be able to tell you. They just won't know. So even asking the question, is it important to you, to start to rediscover that stuff again? And then majority of the time they'll say yes. Otherwise they wouldn't have come into the service in the first place. They'd have just carried on. They'd have cracked on out there doing what they were doing. But there's something wiser in them that knows that that's not the direction that they want to keep going in. And your values, the what or who's important, is like a compass. It helps you to kind of check in from time to time and notice, is what I'm doing, which is the stuff above the line, the behaviours, is what I'm doing helping me to create the life that I want? But what happens is most of the time we get so caught up in our minds thinking about how life should be that it can get so overwhelming. But what actually changes our lives is not necessarily what's flowing through our minds. It's what we do in the world through our behaviour. So this kind of leads me on to looking at the mind and our senses. So noticing the difference between how it feels to move towards and away, and then noticing the difference between being in our minds and being in our senses. So where do you think we spend most of our time? Or what do you notice in yourself? Where do you spend most of your time? In your mind or in your senses? If anybody would like to share in the chat. Yeah, basically, yeah. We're all caught up. Yeah, we're all up here a lot of the time, most of the time. So in my experience, I kind of spend most of my time down here. And then with practice, I'm kind of noticing that's happening and then shifting into my senses. So we could do that briefly now. So just taking some time, and this is a mindfulness practice. This isn't formal mindfulness. This is why the matrix is so good, because formal mindfulness can be really challenging for a lot of people. Sitting with your thoughts and not having anything to kind of distract yourself from, it can be way too much for a lot of people. So in all the years that I've been doing this work, mindfulness practice is probably useful for people when they're a bit further on, when they've started to kind of notice what shows up for them, notice their behaviours, and then maybe doing some more formal practice. So a very simple, quick practice is to get people to connect in with their five senses, to invite them to maybe look around the room and notice five things that they see. So the likelihood is that the mind's going to be chattering away in the background, but also the beauty of mindfulness is that you can shift your attention. It doesn't mean that thoughts are going to stop, but you can shift your attention into your senses. So in the rooms that you're in, five things that you can see. You can even name them. Like for me, I've got a little plant here, some of my notes on the wall, a yoga mat over there, a cup down there, some little post-it notes that I've got stuck all around me. And then like four things that maybe you can hear. I can hear a bit of traffic. I can hear my own voice. I can hear my chair if I move, tapping on my desk. And then three things you can kind of like touch. So the feel of the desk. I can feel my feet against the floor. I can feel the weight of my body sat down on the chair. And then if there's anything that you can smell, I can't really smell much. There's a couple of pens here that I could probably smell, but I'm not sure that's appropriate. And then taste. So just kind of bringing your attention inside your mouth. Some people use like raisins for this exercise, just doing a raisin exercise. I might do that in the weeks to come. So what you'll notice is that you're at the foreground is your sensory experience, and the way that you move through the world with your senses is by doing stuff. You're receiving information, you're receiving the data from the external world. So another aspect of the matrix is that some people include at the top here the outer world at the top, and they include down here the idea of the inner world. Ooh. And again, asking people, inviting people, do you think it's possible to notice the difference between your inner world and your outer world over the next week? Do you think it's possible? And that's a question going out to all of you as well. Do you think it's possible over the next week or so to start to notice the difference between your inner world and the difference between your outer world, the difference between how it feels to move towards who's important to you and approach that stuff, and how it feels when you're doing these away or relief moves to try and get away from your difficult internal experiences? Do you think it's possible to do that? It's kind of homework without homework. And you can ask the people that you work with, is it possible? And usually people will be like, yeah, I think I could give it a go. Yeah, is it possible to try? Yeah, that's all you can ask. Is that the thing with this stuff is that the hardest part about noticing is remembering. We quite easily forget to notice, because if you look here, we get pulled into the mind. And we've got so good at getting sucked down into the mind that it takes effort to bring ourselves into our sensory world. So yes, I kind of already practiced mindfulness to reduce sensory perception. Great. Okay. So what I wanted to share with you next is another activity that I do with clients, unless there is any questions or comments. I hope it hasn't been too confusing. And if you want to do a screenshot, this is the time to do it. I'll stop sharing my screen in a moment. Okay. Right. So the next activity is just a kind, because people learn differently. So this is a visual representation of what I've been verbally trying to explain. So what another activity that we do with clients in groups is we will draw the horizontal line and do the 5 senses, right? The 5 senses at the top, mind at the bottom. And then we will draw this little stick man, call him whatever you want, Bob. And on the board we'll write, we'll ask the question, what thoughts do you have? Or like an example of something difficult that's happened that most people can relate to. And that might be, what thoughts did you have before your last job interview, or if you apply it to services, before you walked into a new service for the first time, what thoughts showed up for you just as you were on your way, or as you'd arranged to do it, or as you were about to have a job interview. What kind of thoughts showed up? And if you're willing to share some in the chat, that'd be really helpful. I've started one. I've put I'm going to fuck this right up. Always have that before a job interview. I can't do this. Yeah. I'm going to put that in quotations. Okay. Okay. I'm not good enough. Will they like me? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Will they like me? Who should I be? Yeah. Who should I be? I don't have the right skills. Ones for me as well is like they're gonna see how nervous I am. They will, which makes me even more nervous. Like, oh my god, they're gonna see how nervous I am. I go all red and my voice starts to shake. They will see how nervous I am. I will freeze. Yeah. It's just like, oh god, it's just so scary. And then like people coming into services as well, you know, what will I say? Will people judge me? Will I know anyone? What if they can't help? Or what if they can help? All of this stuff. So the list kind of goes on and on. So on the board, when I'm in a group, I'll usually write it. As you can see, these squiggles around here, I'll write down all of the thoughts and surround the Bob. Let's call him Bob. So visually, when you see Bob with his thoughts about either going into a service or going to his job interview, what do you notice when Bob is below the line? What can you see? And this is just a kind of a process of investigation. It's not, there's no right or wrong. If anybody's willing to share their thoughts, that'd be really helpful. Yeah, he's surrounded. Absolutely. But yeah, Bob is kind of there, under the line. Room temperature. I'm not sure what you mean by that, James. But you know, he's stuck. Yeah, he's stuck under the line. Yeah, and he's trapped, isn't he? He's trapped and surrounded. Yes, lovely word. Yeah, restricted. And do you think that that's, you know, a nice place to be for him? In there, kind of like surrounded by all of these thoughts, trapped by all of these thoughts. Yes, absolutely. It can be completely overwhelming. So this is a visual of when somebody is stuck in their minds. And in ACT, we call it hooked. So we get hooked by a thought or hooked by a belief, hooked by a train of thought, or a story or a narrative. And when I say story, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it's not true. It's the words, images that flow through our minds that we pay a lot of attention to, that we really get stuck on. So the next part is I'm going to shift Bob above the line. So Bob is shifted above the line. He's paused. He's noticed that he's kind of stuck in his thoughts, and often when we're stuck in them, we can kind of drive them and fuel them and keep them going. So he's noticed that he's doing that, and he's come into his five senses. And he's like, right, what can I hear? What's around me? What can I see? What am I doing in response to my mind? Often, you know, you kind of ruminate and rehearse and plan, and which can be helpful until it becomes unhelpful. So what do you notice now that Bob has shifted into the above the line space? Like visually, what do you notice? He's freer. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, Claire. He has got some space around him, that it's clearer for him. So up there, he can kind of maybe connect a bit more with his values, perhaps. Because when we're all consumed, there's no space to kind of have a little look round and see what's going on. Are the thoughts still there? Yeah, he hasn't got rid of them, has he? But he can now see them from a different perspective. And the beauty of mindfulness helps us to create some space around our thoughts and not to buy into them and not to take them so seriously. When we are stuck in them, we believe everything our mind tells us. When we see them as just thoughts, yes, they impact us. However, it's our mind just doing what minds do, churning out the constant train of thought. And we can see it from a different perspective and start to connect in with what's important. But the start of that is to notice. We need to notice first that we are fused or stuck in an unhelpful narrative about perhaps the future, about what's going to happen. And often, when we unhook from our minds, we are able to make more skillful choices about what we want to do next. And a really good kind of diffusion technique or unhooking technique is to simply say to yourself when you're having a thought, is I'm having the thought. So, for example, down here, I'm having the thought that I'm going to fuck this up, or I'm having the thought that I can't do this, or something else like my mind is telling me I'm going to freeze, or my mind is telling me I don't have the right skills, or who am I to go for this job? And then, so if I take you back, so is there any other comments or anything that anybody would like to share about what they noticed about that activity before I move into the next bit? And again, if you want to take a screenshot of that, I'll get rid of all those bits. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing this and go back to the other one, the matrix. So, as I was saying, when we are above the line, so we notice we're below the line and we shift into the outer world, we've got more control over what we do when we're above the line. So in this model, when we're below the line, especially in the lower left, we don't have much control over this stuff. Yucky stuff just shows up. But what we do have control over is how we respond and what we do. And the key to the matrix is workability. So if every time I feel, or when I feel stressed, I go and have a bath to find relief from stress, that's workable. But if every time I feel stress, when I start thinking about a job interview and I start planning a way to avoid it, or I call to say, I'm sorry, I can't do it, I'm not sure how workable that would be for me to create the life that I want. Or like these webinars, you know, when they're building up, I like on the Thursday, like yesterday and this morning, I have these thoughts like, why are you doing this, Sue? Why do you do this to yourself? Why don't you just, go and find a job which is kind of a steady income? You won't have to worry about doing this. You won't have to feel so vulnerable explaining this stuff out into the world. And then I'm like, okay, so yeah, I could do that. I could go out into the world and find an easy job. But it wouldn't move me closer to the meaningful life that I want. So the price that I pay for moving closer to the meaningful life that I want is that I'll get anxiety and I'll get stressed. And am I willing to pay that price in the service of those that are important to me? And yeah, I am. And it makes it kind of my willingness to be with difficulty grows when I'm more connected with what's important. It's that compass stuff. Keep checking in with your compass, and you can only work out whether what you're doing is in line with your values by how it feels when you're doing it and after you've done it. Which is why in services we are inviting people to engage in new behaviours so they can start to work out what works and what doesn't. It's shaping their life how they want it. And the mind is much less important than behaviours when it comes to change. It's what you do that matters, not always what you think. Because your mind will convince you, your head will get in the way of you doing stuff. When I feel a bit better, or when I'm not so stressed, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. It's about doing stuff, and then the mind might follow, or it might not. But the point is to create a life which has got meaning and purpose. I think I've about covered as much as I wanted to. I hope it's been helpful. It's really hard to gauge with these webinars because you haven't got people with you, and that is the aspect of doing these groups that I've loved over the years, is that actual connection with other human beings. There's something really beautiful and healing in having a room full of people who are sharing their experiences, sharing what they've noticed. The most important thing is doing this work without judgment, and without wronging somebody for their experiences, humanizing, normalizing, especially the lower left stuff. And the most important thing about the top right hand side, that behavioral stuff, which is moving you closer to the life that you want, is that for people who are stepping onto the path of recovery, small steps, and keep breaking it down. So I'm going to be doing these webinars every week. I'll be doing a different activity after I've done the matrix. So if it is something that you're interested in continuing to learn and hearing my ramblings and what I want to share, because I want to get this out more into the world, especially into the recovery community. I think it's not out there enough in the addiction field. These are free. You can record them. I've recorded them, so you can re-watch them, or you can join me live. If you're not here with me live, you can share it with your colleagues or friends, or if you want to come back and join me live, that's really helpful, because then we can kind of have an interactive experience. I've got a website as well, which is soonightrecovery.co.uk. I'm also a trainer for teams in the addiction field. I can do stuff online or in person, so if that is something that you'd be interested in, then please get in touch. But if not, thank you for participating. Thank you for being a part of this, and hopefully I will see you again at some point, or see your comments again. So yes, I'll stop sharing now. Thank you. See you again. Oh, and if you have any questions, just email me at sue.knight290@gmail.com.